John?
Well, thank you, Lydia. And it's been a long time that we have known each other, and it's been quite a while since I saw you last. And I'm glad to see you're still looking very youthful.
Oh, thank you.
Your hair is darker than mine.
We're all aging parallel universes, so.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about my history. I'm an MD originally from Scotland, and I've always been interested in physics. So after medicine, I emigrated as an intellectual refugee to Toronto to do a PhD in neuroscience. And I found that kind of boring. So I went on to my first love, which was physics and electronics. So I did a 4-year degree at U of T, University of Toronto, in electrical engineering. And after I graduated as a professional engineer, I got a job with Health Canada based on my medical degree and my engineering degree. So, and I was put in charge of electrotherapy devices that were often unsafe. And at that time, we were particularly focused on safety of cardiac pacemakers and electrosurgical devices and cardiac defibrillators. So with my background in electronics, I could, understand all of that. And I had a great career for about 10 years. And then I moved back to Toronto and to open my own company, Biophysica, to invent products mostly for people to use at home, to give people power over their own lives, using technologies that were non-invasive and safe, things like magnetic field therapy, electroacupuncture, TENS, and a friend of mine came to me and said, I have chronic fatigue syndrome, and I've heard that colloidal silver is good against the Epstein-Barr virus and other viruses that can cause chronic fatigue and Lyme disease. So I became interested and realized there was an opportunity to apply my electronic knowledge to designing apparatus for people to use at home. So that's what I've been doing now for about 30 years. And I've come up with portable. I put the camera at this angle so that I can show you some of these devices. Okay, so there's my portable colloidal silver generator. And it has a control, the things you want to control when you put silver in water to get the atoms off of the silver into the water. Then we drink the water. There have to be electrodes. I'll show you what they look like. Here's an electrode. It's 2 inches by 6 inches. So it's a fairly substantial area of metal. Here is copper electrodes. And this, again, 2 inch by 6 inch. It's a fairly substantial area that when you pass electric current through it, you get very small nanoparticles, and that's crucial to the quality. And then I do quite a lot of colloidal gold, where this is a gold electrode. You see the gold color? So now what we do is have a silver electrode and a gold electrode, and we put them simultaneously in a container. If I can show it to you, like here's a 2-gallon container, and we sit with a tap, and we fill it with distilled water. We sit the generator with the electrodes on top of it, and it sits there for a day, releasing the atoms. And when you release atoms, they become ions, which are electrically charged, positively charged. And then that's a glass container. This is a plastic one. It has a 4-inch diameter mouth. So the colloidal generator sits comfortably on that, and it produces, say, 2 gallons of the colloidal mineral water in 24 hours. We do it slowly to get the highest quality, to get the smallest nanoparticles, because if these clusters of ions are too big, they will not pass through the blood-brain barrier. Let's see. So we want the clusters of atoms that we call nanoparticles. We want them to be able to penetrate into the important organs where they're needed, like the kidneys. Any organ that is susceptible to microbial attack or biofilm, like the kidneys, the liver, hepatitis, the brain, encephalitis. Just about every organ can be attacked by viruses and bacteria, including things like the gums, the mouth, the ears. Every piece of tissue on our body is vulnerable to attack. So when we drink the colloidal silver, it goes systemically to every organ. And then we also apply it locally. So we have a double-pronged attack, particularly on things like gum disease that most people suffer from. The silver can penetrate both systemically and locally. So diseases like cystitis, inflammation of the bladder, responds very well to the silver nanoparticles. Myocarditis, hepatitis, and any organ that becomes infected can be protected by the silver nanoparticles. And a nanoparticle is a cluster of ions, and a bunch of ions, they're positively charged. They come together in a cluster, but they form a double layer which protects them from the water. And the outside of that layer is negative in order to balance the electrical charge. So the core of a nanoparticle is positive, but the outside is negative. So that negativity is what damages the bacteria or the virus. So it's a powerful charge that when it's released, it can burn a hole in the virus or the bacteria and damage it. And it can it's particularly good at damaging the spike protein of the coronavirus. It turns out the coronavirus, the spikes are all positively charged. So the negative charge of the nanoparticle and the positive charge, they come together in a way that's destructive to the spike of the coronavirus. It turns out too that the spike is not a spike. The virus is far more intelligently designed than just a simple solid spike. Each spike is actually a hypodermic syringe. And even most scientists don't know that. In reading the literature in the last year, it's come out now that there's a core, a central lumen, or like a hypodermic syringe, like a mosquito syringe. So you've got about 50 to 80 spikes, syringe-like spikes, all waiting to inject the contents of the body of the virus into our cells. So this is why the coronavirus is so deadly and so effective. It's because of these hypodermic spikes. But not only that, but the spikes are incredibly complex. They are not just a solid matter. They are a coil within coils of proteins that allow it to flex and not to be broken, and it can penetrate deeply into the cells of our body. Now, these nanoparticles can be shaped. I'm working now on different ways of shaping the nanoparticles so that they have a point to be like a weapon. So weaponized nanoparticles, because we are now seeing weaponized viruses. So we now can have nanoparticles that are weaponized, that can take on have a certain shape. When we expose the nanoparticle as it's forming to lasers and light, it can shape the nanoparticle into shapes that are more effective to deal with these viruses, so that any virus or bacteria is susceptible to the nanoparticle. And silver, as you probably know, has been around for thousands of years. It's been known to have antimicrobial properties since the time of the ancient Egyptians. And the Romans used silver in their kitchen utensils. The aristocracy of Europe always used silver goblets, and they would let their wine ferment. And wine, the alcohol becomes vinegar, and vinegar is acetic acid. So they would be drinking silver acetate as a prevention against smallpox and all the other diseases that were prevalent at that time. Typhoid, for example, the Salmonella typhi, the Salmonella organism of typhoid, it can be eradicated with silver. Unfortunately, Queen Victoria's husband didn't know that. He died of typhoid. It's too bad that we didn't have colloidal silver for him back then. So, so there've been all these, even epidemics of bubonic plague could have been treated by the silver. So that the nanoparticulate form is far more powerful than the old chemical form, like silver acetate, silver oxide. So the nanoparticle is weaponized. So how we do that? We get the generator, the colloidal generator, and we put the electrodes, plug them in, and so that we have a pair. We have two electrodes to complete the circuit. Let me see if I get that info. Yeah. So that's the way, and that then goes into the container. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So it's the container, then we fill with distilled water, and then let this sit and apply electrical current. In this case, I apply 100 volts across the electrodes to take the atoms off of the metal. So that was a copper and silver. This is a giant magnesium electrode. This is 6 inch by 12 inch. And this is for my customers who are in the business of bottling, running a bottling plant. Or they're making large volumes, or they have a farm, so that this large plate can be driven more powerfully with more current, electrical current, to get the atoms off. So magnesium, as you probably know, is we need more magnesium than any other element. So I get a lot of customers asking to make their own colloidal magnesium and colloidal copper, and that's the, let's see if I get the copper electrode. You see the redness of the copper, and colloidal gold is very popular. Yeah, that's my gold electrode. Yeah. And I clean it each time because a layer of oxide forms. See if I can show it to you. Yeah, there's the gold. So that's a large chunk of gold, 2 inch by 6 inch. That would be several $1,000s. But I can afford it because I buy it wholesale. But most people don't have a gold electrode this big. So I can turn out a lot of gold and at the same time silver, because silver and gold combined is called, it's called electrum. Electrum was the ancient elixir of the alchemists who were on a search for immortality. They believed that electrum or silver and gold combined could affect the pineal gland, which is the organ of aging. And gold does in fact enhance brain function. Studies have shown that our IQ is enhanced, our intuitive abilities are enhanced when we take gold. So that I take gold and silver combined now every day as a nutritional supplement and as a prevention against the most deadly disease of aging, which is Alzheimer's. And only in the last couple of years now, scientists have said that they have found viruses in the brains of Alzheimer's patients who died of Alzheimer's. And it's mostly a herpes virus. And there are many herpes viruses, but they are insidiously doing damage decade by decade in our nervous system and in our brain and in our eyes, why we get macular degeneration. These are insidiously damaging our bodies. So that's part of the reason that I take colloidal silver as a preventive against Alzheimer's. So let me just see, I made some notes about things I want to cover. Oh yeah, the nanoparticle has an electrical charge. It's called a zeta potential. And this charge is what defines a colloid. So that's why it's called a colloidal solution, colloidal silver, because the particles have an electrical charge that repel each other so that they do not combine or coalesce or aggregate. Because if the liquid loses the charge, then they all aggregate and fall to the bottom of the container. And it's the zeta potential that is a measure of quality. And I, from time to time, send off samples of my product to have. This is a sample from a laboratory called Anton Paar Laboratories, and they specialize in measuring nanoparticles and zeta potential. This chart is on my website. It's showing that my colloidal silver has the highest zeta potential of 100 millivolts, in contrast to other competing colloidal generators like on Amazon, that people selling colloidal silver. But first of all, it's generally not more than 10 parts per million, which is too dilute. The particles are too big. They're way up at 100 nanometers instead of down at 4, 5 to 10 nanometers. And they have minimal zeta potential. Another report shows this graph here. My nanoparticles are coming in at 2.5 nanometers, 2 or 3 nanometers, so that they're extremely high quality. And I now have control over the nanometer size, so I can make a range of nanoparticle size that seems to be important to capture all the different viruses and bacteria that we're susceptible to. Now, it turns out that all metals have an antimicrobial benefit, particularly copper. Silver the most of all, but colloidal copper not only can kill vegetative organisms and molds and fungus, which is why we use copper in swimming pools instead of chlorine. So to take colloidal copper is also wise. Colloidal gold also has some antimicrobial benefits, and all the other metals too. The colloidal form is more absorbable than the chemical form. For example, the magnesium, instead of magnesium sulfate or magnesium oxide, if we take the colloidal form, it's more readily absorbed. Likewise with zinc. And as you probably know, zinc is important for the immune system because the immune system depends on the thymus gland. The thymus gland is right here in the upper part of the chest, and it drives the immune system, and it will not work. Thymoglobulin will not work without the presence of zinc. So that's why zinc is so important. So I sell all these electrodes and support people to make all the colloidal metals that are possible, including some weird ones like I get requests for niobium. Can you get me a niobium electrode? And I say, no, I don't think I can. And other weird electrodes that people are looking for, titanium, ruthenium. Can you get me a ruthenium electrode? So I don't even know what ruthenium will do, but certainly I'm promoting the more popular and useful metals as nutritional supplements in the colloidal form, because the body, all the liquids of the body are in colloidal form. They have that electrical charge. That's why the red blood cells don't stick together. They're in a kind of colloidal suspension. Their electrical charge keeps them apart and keeps them separate from each other. I have a new website called colloidalsolutions.net, where I've been collecting the last few years of research literature on colloidalsolutions.net. And one of the things that came up in my studies of reading hundreds of articles on nanoparticles of all kinds is that cancer responds very well to colloidal silver and colloidal copper. And if you have friends or so who have cancer, go on to my colloidalsolutions.net website, and I have a whole page on cancer, how the research that's been done on colloidal silver and colloidal copper for cancer. So it's very important. They seem to be very effective. So it's a no-brainer. People with cancer should be on the silver and the copper. And you cannot really overdose, certainly not on silver. It's totally safe. I also have a page there on the safety of colloidal silver. And studies have shown that there is no damage done to any of the body organs because of the silver or even the copper. We don't want too much copper, but it doesn't do damage. And the colloidal magnesium and gold, they're all totally safe. I want to talk a bit about prions. You've probably been hearing lately how the spike protein fragments into prionic subforms because they still carry the RNA that has an infective capability. And that's what prions are. Prions cause mad cow disease and probably similar disease in other animals. I don't know if do horses get mad cow disease, Lidia? Mad horse disease? No? No, maybe not.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure if it was an agent, they could.
We know about mad cow disease, and that's been very severe in Europe, particularly in Britain, mad cow disease. Now, there's a human form of mad cow disease that affect where prions cause that disease, the fatal disease in humans. So the silver will inactivate these prionic RNA fragments by latching onto them, and with their negative zeta potential can do damage to these RNA, DNA fragments. Biofilm. You probably know that bacteria, when they accumulate together, they can stick together and form a semi-solid material. And that can happen inside the bladder, for example, with someone who has cystitis. They can get biofilm on the ureters. That can be quite serious because the antibiotics cannot get through the biofilm. So bacteria have a natural defense against traditional antibiotics. However, the silver, because of its zeta potential, its electrical charge, can burn through the biofilm. And this is why antibiotics and the silver together have formed a very good combination in very resistant forms of kidney disease, for example. They seem to work synergistically together. I want to talk a bit about when people select colloidal silver, they go onto the internet and they find that the colloidal silver is being sold on Amazon. It turns out that now many of the big sellers on Amazon have bought their apparatus from me. And I discovered that a year ago when the pandemic started. I was getting frantic calls from the big suppliers saying, I can't keep up with the orders. I know you're doing commercial colloidal machines. I want to buy one because I need to make like 50 gallons at a time. 50 gallons is one of these huge drums. So I started selling. That's when I started making these commercial industrial size electrodes for 55-gallon drums, not just a pair, but 6 pairs, so 12 electrodes in one big 55-gallon drum. And I even have a customer in Sweden who uses 300-gallon tanks, and he's got multiple machines of mine with these giant silver electrodes that hang down into the water, and then he can drive them with a heavy current for greater productivity and sell it, by the gallon. So let's see. Are there any questions at this point? Yeah.
Well, this is phenomenal information, John. Thank you for volunteering your time to share this incredible knowledge and all your years of expertise and your big heart to come here today and share this with us. It's phenomenal information, and I'm sure there are many questions. So who would like to ask a question of Dr. John Stewart? Just put your hand up, or no questions. Jim, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. John. Have there been any clinical studies involving colloidal silver for the treatment of particular illnesses?
Oh, yes. If you go onto my Colloidal Solutions website, I have page after page on specific conditions that have been investigated in the medical literature with links. So what you can just click on the link. They'll take you right to that article. And there are many. Let me just see here. I'll go on. I'm on that website right now, including cancer and safety. Oh yeah, here we are. All the different medicals, the benefits of colloidal iron, for example. People with iron deficiency anemia can be taking colloidal iron more beneficially than iron chemical supplements, because the metal is absorbed more in the colloidal form. And this is supported by the great colloidal expert, what's his name? Joel, I forget now. there's a lot of support for the colloidal form that we should be taking. The corona. So you'll see there are quite a few diseases and organisms that are susceptible to not only silver but copper, colloidal copper, and then the benefits of colloidal gold on the brain. That should be. I get quite a few orders for the gold electrodes. People wanting to enhance their brain function because the gold goes to the pineal gland, which, as you probably know, is important for intuition and cognition.
Thank you. That's
So
amazing.
why do people,
Oh, go ahead, Jim.
one more. So why do people buy the electrodes and not buy the colloidal form straight off?
Well, that's a good question, because if you look on Amazon, and I've had studies done on my competitors, and you'll find that the quality is not there. When many of the people selling colloidal silver are using an inferior, or they're overdriving the electrodes and getting large nanoparticles around 100 nanometers that can't possibly go through the blood-brain barrier. The research shows that anything more than 25 nanometer diameter, any molecule bigger than 25 nanometers cannot pass the blood-brain barrier. And this is why, as some of you may know, meningitis is so difficult to treat, because the antibiotics that would be effective, the molecule is too big to get through the blood-brain barrier. It's a well-known problem. This is why the silver has to be less than 25 nanometers in size. And I've got mine down to about 3 nanometers in size.
Just a quick question. Sorry, John, just a quick question about that. So for those of us who have been buying it from the health food store, when we look at the label, parts per million, how does that translate to the nanometers?
Well, there's a micron. A micron is 1,000 nanometers. A human hair is 100 microns. You can see a red blood cell is about 7 to 10 microns, so barely observable with the human eye. So anything less than 1 micron is invisible except through the microscope. And even, the mitochondria, which many of you know about, the mitochondria in every cell produces the ATP energy, and they're half a micron. They're 500 nanometers, so they're too small to be seen visually. So anything less than that, you really need an electron microscope. And the electron microscopes nowadays can go right down to atomic level. And that's why they've been able to find and explore the nature of the spike protein that are, and there's a whole lot of literature on that. And I told you a spike is not a spike, it's a hypodermic syringe, because there's a hollow core right down the length of the so-called spike. So it's a very insidious, highly intelligent organism. Let me give you the dimensions. A coronavirus is 120 nanometers diameter. The spike is about 12 to 20 nanometers long. So and then there are about 80 to 100 of these on every virus. So you can imagine 100 hypodermic syringes all waiting to inject the contents of the virus, the nucleic acids of all of that, into our cells. The diameter of the spike is only 2.5 nanometers, and that's the size that I'm now getting in my nanoparticles. So that's why my product is so effective, because of the quality of what I'm producing. to treat. Now, when you buy colloidal silver, for example, here is a competitor of mine in different sizes of bottles on Amazon, where you'll find that the ppm, the parts per million, is only 10 parts per million, and it's not effective enough. And the reason they're regulated down to about 10 is because the FDA don't want it to work. The FDA officials are in the pocket of the drug companies, and they flip back and forward. CEO of the drug company becomes an FDA official for a few years, and then they jump back. So they make sure that at 10 parts per million, people are not taking enough to be effective. And secondly, when you do an analysis, as I have on this, and a competitive analysis, you find that their zeta potential is only 20 millivolts, whereas mine is up at 100. So, and the size is too big. There's no zeta potential. So that's why these are not all that effective. They have some limited effectiveness, but nowhere near what is possible. So that may be why some of you who have been buying colloidal silver perhaps have found that it's not all that effective, because the quality is not there and the quantity. The only problem of colloidal silver is people don't take enough.
So what would be the parts per million then? So we have just sort of, for us lay people, what are we aiming for, parts per million? So what do you sell that's the parts per million?
I found that when you charge the water electrically, there's a build up to 50 parts per million, and it won't go any higher than that with the small nanoparticle without coagulating and losing the zeta potential. So there's an upper limit. It levels off at around 50. So companies who are claiming 1,000 parts per million, maybe they do have 1,000. Maybe they have huge rock size particles of silver that are not going to be effective. Whereas when you have 2 to 5 nanometer particles, all with a high zeta potential, then you have a very, very effective product. And that's just why people should be making their own. First of all, it costs them, once they've got the machine and the electrodes, it costs them almost nothing to make, and then they can give it to or sell it to their friends and relatives.
Well, that's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, so not to belabor that point. So what is the range of parts per million? I think I'm going to be ordering from you now, John, until I figure out how to make it myself with your advice. But what is the range of parts per million until we can make our own?
Well, a range of 30 to 50. And at that level, at 30, there is a test you can do. Not only, there's a conductivity meter. Let me see if I have it here. Oh yeah, this is a conductivity meter. It measures the electrical conductivity. It's made by Hannah, and I sell these to many of my customers. They can see the electrical conductivity of the water slowly rising, and it's an indirect indication of parts per million. But there's a better test than that. When you taste the water, when you start to get the metallic taste in your throat, you know you've got about 30 parts per million. And if you don't get that taste, that you know it's not so effective.
Oh. Wow, this is incredible information. Thank you. Anybody else have questions for John? I'm sure we have a lot of questions. Who was next? Martin, were you next?
Go ahead.
And then
yes. So I guess I have to go on your website. If you have, if I was a customer and I said I have allergies and chronic inflammation in the muscles from several injuries, is that is that something that your product can address?
Uh, Funnily enough, you should ask that, because I had a conversation with a customer who tells me that their allergies cleared up with colloidal silver. That's not supposed to happen, because allergies are not generally infective. They're autoimmune. But this client told me, yeah, my allergies cleared up with the colloidal silver. So colloidal silver does a lot more things than we're aware of. So that's definitely would help. Inflammations of any organ seems to respond well to the colloidal silver, and perhaps to the colloidal zinc, because the zinc again drives the immune system. And we're all depleted in zinc and magnesium. We need 1,000 milligrams a day of magnesium. Same with iron. We need 1,000 milligrams a day of iron. The magnesium is written about by the lady doctor, the magnesium doctor. Do you know who I'm talking about? She's a Canadian and she fled to the US. Carolyn Dean wrote the book on magnesium. And she tells us that we need 1,000 milligrams a day of magnesium. Zinc, we need about 50 milligrams a day, and none of us get that in our diet generally. One thing I forgot to mention is the safety. You've all heard of the blue man who claimed to turn blue with colloidal silver. And he was all over the internet, not so much lately, but the drug companies exploited him. And I think they painted his face with some food colorant, because the blue color on his face is so fake and phony. And he claims that he took a cup full of crudely made colloidal silver for about 2 years and he turned blue. So, and that has scared a lot of people. So that because the drug companies don't want people to use colloidal silver, not because it's they're afraid of people taking it. They're afraid of animals. See, the drug companies make most of their profit from supplying antibiotics to cattle and poultry and fish farms, and not to humans. Humans don't use enough antibiotics to give them much profit. But if the fish farms, the poultry farms, and the cattle farms started using colloidal silver, the drug companies would lose financially very, very badly. So thank you for that question. Yeah.
Well, thank you, John. This is amazing. I have heard about the blue man, and oftentimes when I mention I take colloidal silver, I get those comments if I've turned blue yet. So I'm glad that you addressed that right up front to clear that urban myth, I guess that's what they call it, up for us. So I am respectful of everybody's time. If you'd like to stay a little bit longer, we can go a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But
just give another minute. You brought up an important point. People ask, should I be taking probiotics? Or is the silver killing my good flora in my colon? The good flora are in the colon, not in the small intestine. And by the time we drink colloidal silver, it's already ingested by the stomach and the small intestine, so it doesn't get into the colon. And nobody that's taken it has any digestive problems that I'm aware of with silver water, including myself. And I've taken it for 30 years. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. It seems like we could have a whole weekend workshop on what John is sharing with us. It's valuable, really valuable information for all of us. Yana, did you want to have a question? Unmute.
Okay. What's that?
Yana, you have to unmute.
Okay. On the website, do you show what, say, just a typically healthy person would take as a prevention? And can you order it like prepared in a bottle? Like, is it, or is it all complicated how you have to take it? Like,
No, no, it's very, very simple. It's just a turnkey. You just plug it in. You plug in the electrodes, put in the water, the distilled water from the grocery store, and just let it sit for a day or two. And then you can drink it right away. You can take it like a mouthful a day. A mouthful is about an ounce
okay.
of 30 milliliters a day. And that's good enough for prevention.
Okay, and all the directions are explained. If you
Yeah,
want.
and I'm available 7 days a week for hotline support.
Okay,
Although I get calls from all over the world
okay,
from my customers, particularly New Zealand. I get a lot of orders from New Zealand and Australia. So I often get calls from New Zealand asking me all these kinds of questions. Yeah.
okay, so that's good, because I all that science stuff sounds complicated, so I want to read it. And do you also, like, maybe you don't even get into this, but do you recommend something like this as opposed to people getting a vaccine for coronavirus, or is that just something you leave up to people as a person?
I think there's too many unknowns right now. It's too controversial, and it's too soon. Historically, it's too soon to produce a vaccine that is safe and effective. And why have a vaccine when you can have colloidal silver, which is far superior and safer? And the reason, of course, is that the drug companies cannot patent silver.
Sure. Okay.
So on that topic, very quickly, people have been asking me if they, once they've had, the V, is there anything that they can do to help minimize the effects of the spike protein? So what is colloidal silver? I guess it always works, but is there any opinion from you on your expertise on how that might support someone's health after they've had the injection?
No, I don't know enough about the vaccines. Keeping up with the literature on the nanoparticles is a full-time job, particularly in the last year. There's there's a lot of interest and activity worldwide on the nanoparticles, particularly silver. So that's where I focus my attention. Trying to make a better product. Yeah.
Wonderful. So one very quick question: if we make our own through your kit, I'm sure you describe everything, but how do we know what the parts per million is? You mentioned there's a measuring device, the hand.
Well, this is where this comes in. It measures the electrical conductivity, which is an indirect representation of the amount of atoms in the water. So it's helpful. And we can see the microsiemens is the measurement of conductivity, slowly rising and rising. But as I say, the best test of all is the taste test. Yeah. Well, thank you all very much for listening. And go onto my website, colloidalsolutions.net, and go onto my two main websites, biophysica.com and biophysica.ca.
Any quick questions for John before we enjoy long distance Reiki sending, for anyone who wants to stay for 5 minutes to receive Reiki? But any other quick questions for John? Anybody? Oh, Teresa. Okay, Teresa, 1 second here. Teresa's on the phone. And okay, Teresa.
I should tell you that I put sacred geometry and sacred inscriptions on my circuit board. So you're actually drinking holy water.
Oh,
that's amazing. Is that are those
in Latin,
boards,
of course?
Are those the boards that you sell, John?
Yeah, it all has sacred inscriptions in Latin, like Ad Majora Dei Gloriam, for example.
Amazing. Well, I'm certainly going to be buying a unit to make my own. I've been buying it for years, and now it's time to graduate and make my own. But Teresa, a quick question for John.
Yes, as you were speaking, John, I went and got a bottle of my Colloidal Silver. And the company name is called Silver and Silver, but it says here Bioactive Silver Hydrocell. And I was wondering if you can tell us what hydrocell is. And on the bottom it says 10 ppm. Is that parts per million?
Yeah, 10, well, first of all, 10 ppm is what the FDA seems to have regulated it down to, so that it's minimally effective. You'll probably also find that if you send a sample to a laboratory, they tell you that the particles are 100 nanometers and there's very little Zika potential. So those are the three things that we want to look at. The parts per million, is it more than 10? The Zika potential, is it more than 20 or 30? And the diameter or size of the nanoparticles should be no more than 25 or 20 nanometers to get through our most important organs like the liver, kidney, spleen, heart, and brain. Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's unlikely. Hydrosol, yeah, that's a well-known make. But again, I haven't had that particular one tested. The competitor that was tested is right here. It's Sovereign Silver, for example. And yeah, Sovereign Silver was found to be, had a Zika potential of only about 20. And if you send me an email, I can send you some literature and links. My email is info@biophysica.com. And I can send you links to these reports, for example.
I think it's info@biophysica.com. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, info.
Okay, thank you.
Info@biophysica.com. Yeah. Good. All good. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, John. I just feel very blessed. I have to thank you and my spirit guides because was it just yesterday after, when was it, John? 2 days ago that I emailed you, and I was sitting at my desk and I had downloaded a message saying, you have to get in touch with John Stewart and have him come on the Conscious Leader Circle. And you were available right away. And it's just been an honor and pleasure. And perhaps we can learn more from you in maybe a greater capacity in a workshop and other things that you can contribute and that we can learn from you. So perhaps this is the beginning of some greater learning with you. So again, we're very honored and for your generosity in joining us today and for all that you offer us. So thank you again, Dr. John Stewart, and to everybody here. Sorry, John.
Okay, yeah, this is my crusade.
Amazing. It's totally amazing. Yeah. Again, feel free to talk to Dr. John Stewart one-on-one. He's completely available and would love to support you in learning more about all of these wonderful tools to get us through these unprecedented times.